All right, thank you. I'm a PhD fellow at the University of Agder, and there I try to estimate and explore why recreational fishers are losing their gear. And I'm using the European lobster as a case study because it's the only recreational fishery, marine recreational fishery, except the tuna, that has a registration system, which makes it relatively easy to assess them. But as a stock assessor at the Institute of Marine Research, I need the total catch. And if you were at my talk on Monday, you know that some of the assessment methods we're using require total catch, meaning the commercial catch, the recreational catch. But what about the catch in the pots that are never retrieved? So I'll give you a quick introduction to the European lobster fishery. We've been fishing lobsters for centuries. In the early 1700s, we were fishing lobsters with big pinchers, 1 meter pinchers, and we were just picking lobsters. Can you imagine the abundance of lobsters it must have been in the 1700s? In the 1930s, we were in the lead exporting lobsters to the European market. And in 1966, in the local newspaper, you could read about Georg Gystad. He only caught 46 lobsters in 146 pots. In the 60s, the commercial fisheries were collapsing. And they all agreed that it was the worst fishery in the living memory. The living memory and the man's memory is rather short, and we quickly get used to a new normal with fewer lobsters in the pots. And the gear changed too. The 146 pots that Georg was using, they were made of wood. In the 60s and 70s, new and more efficient pots arrived. They were catching more lobster, bigger lobsters, and they were made of plastic and metal, made to last for a long time. Today, with more than 34,000 recreational lobster fishers, there's quite a lot of pots in the water during the relatively short fishing season. And with so many pots in the water, accidents happen. The pot slips down to deeper waters, or a boat passes by and cut the lines. But how often do these accidents happen, that a recreational fisher are losing their pots? So since we have this registration system in place, we believe we have a full control of the total population of the recreational lobster fishers, which makes it easy to do a probabilistic off-site survey method where we randomly select 600 recreational fishers from 3 different regions, and we ask them, this is an annual survey, we ask them once at the end of the season about their catch, about their effort, but also how many pots they lost and why they lost their pots. And we get really great response rates, 80–90%. So what we found was that, and it's probably no wonder, but the probability of losing a pot increase the longer fishing period you have. That could partly be explained by rougher weather at the end of the season, but also longer exposure time. And we struggle with light up north, so in November, December, it's less light and could also be one of the reasons why pots are lost. And this is the same for commercial and recreational fishers. And yes, we grouped all the recreational fishers into one group here. The more pots they use also increase the probability of losing a pot. The recreational fishers are allowed to use 10 pots, while the commercial fishers are limited to 100 pots. But the majority of the recreational fishers, they're not losing pots. Only 30%-ish are losing pots. So the individual pot loss is relatively low. But since there's so many recreational fishers, it adds up with a lot of uncertainties, of course. But in 2024, we estimated that 8,300 pots were lost only by recreational fishers during the lobster season. And then we have crab fishery and neprops fishery, but that's another story. That's 8,300 pots that could continue to fish for a week, a month, or a year. Crabs, lobsters go into the pot, some escape, some are retained, and function as bait for new animals. In this ghost pot, this was found last year. It's 4 lobsters in this ghost pot. That is the same amount of lobsters that my grandfather used to brag about when there were still quite a lot of lobsters left to be caught. We don't know how many lobsters that end their days in pots that are not retrieved. But we do know that it is an economic issue for the recreational and the commercial fishers. These pots are quite expensive. We know it's causing more marine litter, potentially a source of contaminants and pollutants. But also, this extra mortality could potentially hinder the rebuilding of a lobster population that is already on a historic low level. But we have a bunch of volunteer recreational sports divers that are trying to do something with it. So in 2024, we lost approximately 8,300 pots. 6,600 pots were retrieved. But this also includes all pots, crab pots, neprops pots, scallop pots, maybe. And only 2,400 pots were reported. So it's not mandatory to report if you lose a pot, but it's recommended. So we're still losing more pots than what we're able to retrieve. When we compare this is not done yet, so, but when we compare this, so in Norway, recreational fishers are allowed 10 pots. They could be soaked for up to 7 days. And our bathymetry is, we have a rigged coast with, it's quite deep in some of the fjord areas. When we compare this to the Tasmanian rock lobster fishery, they're allowed 1 pot. Do they take better care of their pots, maybe? They're only allowed to soak their pots for 48 hours. They're mainly dropping their pots on the way to go fishing for other things and then animals and then bring it back. In Tasmania, only 7% of the recreational fishers lost their pots compared to our to our fishery. So one thing is the management measures that are in place could explain some of the reasons why we have such a high pot loss number. But also, when we ask the fishers, why are you losing your pots? They're claiming it's someone else that took it. That's the main reason. While when we're going for dive surveys, or when we talk with when we're retrieving gear, most of the pots we find are at deeper water, so they slipped into deeper waters. The line is not long enough, or the buoy is too buoyant and are making the pot drift away. All of this points to both a knowledge issue when it comes to this very specialized fishery. There's maybe not enough knowledge to do such a specialized recreational fishery. Some of the management, like soak time, limits on soak time and effort. So that's some of what this points to. But also that recreational fishers can potentially contribute to a massive ghost fishing mortality that's currently unaccounted for in stock assessment. So I'm looking forward to take this another step to try to integrate that also into the assessment. I think that was it's a bunch of other good people behind this, of course, that I'm grateful of.
We have time for several questions here, so Howard.
Thanks. Yeah, awesome talk. It's quite concerning results, if anything. Do you think the recreational anglers would potentially introduce like an escape mechanism, like something that'll like a galvanic release that after they'll have to replace every time they put their pot in, or something like that, like a piece of wire maybe that.
So it's already mandatory to have a cotton thread. That's supposed to rot between 2 to 3 months, and that would open up the pot. Or a degradable panel is mandatory. So there's already some mitigation measures in place.
Okay.
But they're not always working as
Yeah.
should, and trying to limit the amount of pots that are lost in the first place is
Absolutely. Yeah.
maybe more important.
Is there any governmental support for the cleanup efforts? Because you said it's voluntary, which is great, but obviously that's not necessarily consistent over time. Is there any governmental support for what is clearly quite a concerning problem?
So there's a fund that is through every time you buy a plastic bag, some of it is allocated to this fund, and they are funding cleanup. So you get a certain amount for each pot that is cleaned up. But it's if the recreational divers were to get paid, then they're no longer recreational divers, which is also an issue. So it needs to be on a volunteer basis for it to be within the legislations we have at the moment.
From the cleanup, do you have any information of the number of animals in the pots when they are like any estimate of how many lobster, for example, are found in lobster pots after half a year?
Yes. So the divers have taken a picture in a box with grid cells, so we could also measure the size of them. So we do have substantial retained numbers, but we haven't analyzed them yet, so they're coming.
Your response rate, why so high?
Why? So I think it is because it's the lobster fishers are super engaged, and that's one of it. We're harassing them to increase the response rates by doing three digital emails, and then send out post letters, and then in the beginning we were calling them afterwards. So we were truly harassing them. But also that we haven't updated. So when you register for the lobster fishery, you register with your bank ID, and having a complete list of email addresses and all. I think that also contributes to the response rate.
So when you ask them to report loss, do you think they report accurately, or there's a desire to under-report, or what would you say to that?
I think it's a good question, and that's why it's so difficult to work with humans.